Hi, Danielle.
Hi, Mel. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Uh, I feel like I've been tossed around the washing machine a few times.
Yeah,
Um,
I will have to say that I'm just going to share this with everybody is Mel and I are not tech gurus by any means. And so whenever we have something go wrong in this in our trying to record, it's like two chickens with their heads cut off trying to figure out what needs to be done. So you can't do anything but kind of giggle at yourself once everything started to work.
yeah, technical aspects of this work really do provide some challenges,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it's been every week, some weeks, hasn't it? So
Yes. Yeah. It can become a lot for both of us, between my internet, it's on the fritz. I don't know what's going on with it. I don't know if it's our side of it or if it's the company. We
mm,
have been losing service 3 or 4 times a day. And so it's just
wow.
been, yeah, it's a hit or miss. So it's been very interesting. But anyways, what's not why we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the Major Arcana card, the Hanged Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will tell you that while we're in the process of recording this, we are most certainly in the energy of the Hanged Man. It coincides quite nicely with this recording. We're recording this in April of 2022, which the beginning of April, we're still in Aries season, which is all about this first month of the zodiac sign. So we are in a lot of, I think you had just mentioned this, Mel, when we were talking prior, is that we're very much in this review portion of our journey, which is what happens in the regular New Year's time, right? And so now we're sitting back and kind of thinking to ourselves what worked for us, what hasn't worked for us, and that takes pause, which is what the Hanged Man is for. So the Hanged Man is the ultimate surrender, sacrifice, or being suspended in time. So it's pausing to not only observe, but also reflect in this moment of stillness. What are you willing to surrender to the greater good? Is the question that you should ask yourself when entering into a situation where you need the time to pause and reflect wherever you're at. And this doesn't have to be the one time a year. This doesn't have to be anything special. This comes up many times throughout the journey where perhaps something hasn't been satisfying, right? And so we're walking through and we're feeling, noting that I'm not feeling satisfied. I'm feeling maybe some bitterness or resentment or frustration in this part of my journey, be it with your career, family, spouse, friendships. It doesn't really matter. There's not a limit to this. And so, what am I willing to surrender to the greater good so that I might get a higher perspective or clearer or more clarity for this specific situation?
Yeah, it's certainly feeling like that's really important with everything that's happened in the last few years. And of course, countries are all at different phases of what's happening around COVID. But as people are coming out of lockdown, moving forward, or going back into work, part of the pause, as you say, is looking back at what changes have happened. Some people's lives have changed dramatically, or do you just need to pause because you've been on go? And the thing with the Aries energy, it can feel quite strong and fast and motivating, can't it?
Yeah, it's a very intense energy, especially if you are not a person that has a lot of fire in their charts or is naturally if you look into more of like the Eastern cultures, it's more like they would say you have a lot of water in you, or you have a lot of
Mm.
earth in you or air in you. So people that don't have a lot of fire are really feeling almost for me, I have very little fire in my chart, and I'm feeling this, it's almost an anxiety ridden feeling where it's
Mm.
not anxiety, but it's still fueling itself like it is. And because I typically don't get that vibration or that feeling unless I'm having anxiety, I'm having to really discern between what is anxiety and what is this fuel that is propelling me forward.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because in some modes of therapy approaches, they say anxiety and excitement sit on the same coin,
Yeah.
and that you can perceive something as anxiety, but actually it's excitement. And so that's interesting. It's like, how do you tune into that and recognize? And if it is anxiety, then part of the pause is to work out, is it that, because you can be halfway through a project, but do I need to just pause, take a breath and not get overwhelmed? Because if you're overwhelmed, then that sort of clouds the way forward, doesn't it?
Yes.
Or is it actually there's some energy that's generating, and same as you know, I'm a Taurus energy. I can get stuck, I can be in wood in terms of the elements. And that fire is unusual for me to feel it like that. And I've been feeling it really strong in everything that I do.
Right.
But you have to put moments in to sit back, don't you, and think, where am I at? It's all feeling a bit scrambled. What do I do next?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, sleep is a thing for me.
Yeah.
During this fire season, I have a tendency not to have a very specific sleep schedule. I don't take a lot of naps. But I am a low energy being. Like I'm not the one that you're going to catch running marathons or doing a lot of housework. It's just not in my blueprint. But right now, how it's affecting me is I'm staying up later and waking up earlier, but then I'm still having the energy to get done through my day what needs to be done. So it's like, it's still working, but I'm trying to, because I'm in this curious stage of my journey, I'm trying to play around with what it is that I can do to make it work to my benefit, as opposed to letting the energies kind of drag me along for its journey. So some of the keywords on the hangman, and I've decided to change it up a little, and I'm adding both the upright and the reverse on the keywords. So whatever it's tuning into you can go back and look up keywords. I make it pretty simple and just follow the basic guidelines of keywords for the card for people. So the keywords are going to be sacrifice. So again, the ultimate surrender. What is it I'm willing to surrender to, which might require a sacrifice on my part, being, keeping my mouth shut for a moment, or, pausing to reflect instead of reacting. It could look like maybe this friendship, this job, this relationship that I'm in. It might require a little sacrifice to push forward. What does that look like for you? Waiting, uncertainty, lack of direction, contemplation, or it could also look like apathy and stagnation. Have you been sitting still for too long? Have you entered the analysis paralysis portion? Are you afraid to take that next step? Are you afraid of what it is that surrender is going to look like for you? And that's when the hanged man can come in reverse. And I will be honest, I've had the hangman in reverse a lot of times. I do suffer from analysis paralysis. I think too big sometimes. I get too stuck in the details and worried about other people's feelings and how it's going to respond inside of them, as if I'm responsible for another person's journey. And so what it does is it pauses me for too long, and it creates stagnation in my experience. And so when I receive the hangman in reverse, I know I have to take action. It's time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. It's really about knowing yourself, isn't it? So if you have experienced like depression or low mood for a long time, and part of that is about not feeling motivation, feeling in neutral, feeling flat, feeling sludgy. So a lot of my practice, we've talked about yin yang yoga before in the Chinese 5 elements. Part of my practice is to do something around something that shifts the energy, whereas other people are go, 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 and don't put time into pause and surrender. So it's going back to what we always say, is about knowing yourself pretty well, isn't it?
Yeah. So up until now, you've really been doing a lot of work on the getting to know yourself part of this. And now what it's asking you is, how is this reflecting inside of your external world? And we could walk this journey a lot easier if it was just you. But we don't live in that reality. We live in a social reality. And so we have to put into play the things that happen in our external world. And we have to be able to sometimes take that pause. And then sometimes we have to take that action. So, knowing where you are in that is going to be a real big help in stepping forward from this point. It really will. So the hanged man is the element of water. So we're talking flow, which it fits perfectly. Are you flowing with the life's events? Is the water needing to stand still for a minute? Is the water rushing faster than you can keep up? It's up to you to decide where you're at inside of that flow. If you need to get up on the banks, perhaps for a couple of hours, couple of days to try to assess what your next move is, or have you been sitting on that bank for too long and it's time to jump back into that water and allow it to rush you through what needs to be done because you've been sitting on the side for too long. I did find it interesting when I started looking, because the hanged man energy was so strong. I went ahead and did a little deeper research on its ruling planet, which is in Neptune. And the Neptune has, obviously, like everything else, it has its light side and its shadow side. And its light side is all about your intuition, your spirituality, and are you in touch with spirit? It's got ideals involved. But its dark side, its shadow side, is deception, disillusionment, or escapism. And now that we're falling, I know that this is a water element, but falling inside of the fire season of Aries, we really are taking a look deeper on what is it, the things that you're doing to escape. If you are sitting for too long inside of this hanged man energy and this, I'm just going to watch, observe, are you escaping the thoughts through food, sex, alcohol, a form of drug use, television, or just playing on your cell phone nonstop? Social media can really drag you in and keep you escaped into another reality, because at the end of the day, Facebook is its own matrix system. It has its own reality that we have to make sure we keep separate from our personal reality. It's easy to combine the two, but we are not Facebook life. We are real life. And so those are just some ideas that you need to keep floating in your head once you know that the planet itself is Neptune. And I would recommend, after listening to this, is just to look up the planet, and it will probably give you a lot of good information. This is a masculine sign, which means, are we moving? Are we putting in this material world some movement forward, or is it time to stand still? And your masculine energy is really good for forward movement. So whenever you are sitting inside of the hanged man, know that this is a temporary thing, that this is going to be something that it's just to pause and reflect. And it can take as little or as long as you need it to, but a decision will need to be made, and a motion forward will have to happen throughout this process. But the hangman is a temporary pause and reflect.
I think one of the things that I'd like to also point our attention to is there's been quite an increase over the last, say, decade, with people getting things like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue sort of symptoms. And for a proportion of people, that can be around diet, it can be past DNA, what's inherited in the family. But it can be that if somebody's been go, 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 putting those moments to pause sometimes needs to be longer, because something that I read in the Gene Keys once is that you can't always push forward with things when they're not ready. But if you're used to making things happen and pushing things forward, and that can be really detrimental to your psyche and your physique. And a couple of years ago, I read a book, and I think a lot more people have become aware of him now, Michael Singer. And he actually talks about the surrender experiment. And I remember reading his book because I think surrender is quite a tricky concept to really wrap your head around. And handing things over to the universe and trusting that things are going to be okay. And if you're feeling ill, unwell, heavy, tired, the fatigue and things like that all the time, then it can feel like that's always your way of life. Whereas if you allow your body to get the right rest, rejuvenation and sleep, and then stretching, exercise and walking and that balance, slowly the system can come online and start to reset itself and recenter. And people have been talking globally, haven't they, about this thing called the Great Reset? Well, our systems also have to reset when there's been a lot of adjustment or change, then the pause is even more necessary, because if the energy is going to come in fast and thick, what you want is to feel more vibrant, and more ready to move forward. If you're in overwhelm and you're stressed and you've not given yourself that time, you can't embrace the opportunities when they come in your direction anyway, because you just won't have the oomph to do that. And
Right.
that's why it's even more important that part of that cycle is to have those downtimes, is to have that sleep, is to have that rest, isn't it?
Oh, it's so important. It really was, when I began this journey, I was the opposite. I had always pushed myself too hard. I was this level of
Yeah.
perfection I needed to reach. I felt lazy otherwise. But as I was healing and growing and adjusting, there was this common theme that would come across, and it was always rest.
Yes.
Rest. And at first it would just frustrate me because I felt like all I was doing was, remember, I spent
Resting.
all those years in bed, but that wasn't resting. I wasn't
Yeah.
resting in bed. I was kicking my own butt the whole time. There was no rest to be had. And so of course it took a while for my body to begin to heal in a way that was giving me a functioning human level.
Yeah.
And I had to pause in order for that to catch up. And so I could get back into a more aligned energy for who I am and what I'm meant to be putting out into this world energetically and receiving from this world energetically.
That's a really important point you make there, Danielle, because, the only time our brains will switch off and not be so active unless you're under high amounts of stress is when you go to sleep. So if you're laying in bed because you've got chronic fatigue, depression, or anything like that, then you're still using energy and still creating that stress in your system if you're having that negative cycle that goes through your brain. And
Yeah.
you're right, if you're used to pushing yourself and working at something, it's very alien to allow yourself to rest, because a lot
Yeah.
of us have messages. I had messages when we were little, and I don't know where it came from. But if you lay on the sofa too long, you're lazy. If you're not out doing something all the time, you've got to play, you've got to be working at something, you've got to be doing something. So then it can be really, we get even further away from harmonizing with our own innate system
Yeah.
and tuning into what we need and feeling that tiredness. And I still, even though I'm much better practice at this,
Right.
I still miss the signs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because we're so conditioned in this belief system.
yeah,
This isn't just our lifetime. This is a generational thing. It was our ancestors who had to wake up and work themselves
yeah,
to sleep in order to get to where we are now. So this is something that is inherent within us, up until this day and age. We haven't had this level of comfort that surrounded us, that maybe we didn't have to work as hard and physically in order to get the things done. And you were talking about chronic fatigue. I have had a couple of sleep studies. I had several health related things up until my awakening, where I really began to heal. And I believe now I won't deny the power of healing yourself, because I've done
yeah,
it. And
yeah.
I have a diagnosis, and it's called idiopathic hypersomnia. And it's kind of like a real weak version of narcolepsy, where it's just permanently exhausted at all times. And I could always lay down. I could always shut my eyes. It's just part of whatever was happening for me at the time. And the more I have healed myself, the less, and I a low energy being, and I've accepted this about myself. However, that low energy looks completely different now than it did in the midst of getting this diagnosis and the level of exhaustion and having to take medication that probably long-term was not healthy for me, and doing all of these things. Now I am no medication, living a life that I don't feel like I have to sleep all the time from. And it really is because of the real rest I received when I decided to start taking care of myself again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very hard when you're in those places, because we've talked offline, haven't we, a few times. And I certainly know, we'd gone through periods of stress with both my kids, one of them in and out of hospital all the time, and my other son being diagnosed with diabetes at 4, and a constant round of hospital trips and trying to understand something. on a scientific level, because if you've got to manage certain conditions, you've got to understand it really deeply.
Yes.
And you don't realize when you're running around as parents or with your own issues, how much, it's almost like you're piling on in terms of that stress and that duress. And I remember hitting a wall at 1 year. And I think the first time it happened to me, chronic fatigue, I think it was the whole year. I was taking the kids to school, coming back, sleeping, picking them up, coming back, feeding them, sleeping. And it's very tough because, of course, children pick up, whatever age you are, you need energy when you've got small children, because you want to take them out on their bikes or run around with them or play at home with them. And like what you've said is, if you're a low energy person anyway, and is that just because years and years of stress has just wiped out whatever your natural resources are? Because the more you're out of tune, it does that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's really, really tricky. And I think that's why we've always been keen to always talk about really getting that balance, haven't we? And the pause itself, and like what you're saying, if you're used to just managing your family and running from one thing to the next, you do have to sit back sometimes and decide, in terms of your values, what is the most pressing things you need to do that day and that week, so that you can have that time out. Because so many people will say, well, I haven't got time for that. I haven't got time to go to a class, or I haven't got time to just kick off my shoes, or this all activity. But actually pausing things and creating stillness and turning off the TV and the social media can be a family event. It doesn't have to be done in isolation. It can be a lifestyle that you start to create without it being in constant chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does make a big difference. It does.
Yeah.
And, I've learned to create a family system that reflects my energetic output.
Yeah.
And so I might not be the mom that can get out and play baseball with you and run amok at the park with you, but I am the mom that can sit down with you and have great conversations, or have movie nights or board game nights, or, something along those lines. So there's not a right or wrong way. It's just about tuning into yourself and creating an environment that helps you thrive. Mel told me one of the most, it took me a while to get to the place, but it was pivotal for me, which is, what is it? Not what they need, not what your spouse needs. What do you need? And what did I need? And I didn't even know how to answer that question, because I have been devoting my experience to my family. And then in that realization, as it was started to kind of come in, and I started doing what I needed to do, it actually started to balance out the things that were going on with the family. And so it feels selfish, it feels weird, but the pause to reflect in that was so important for me. It really changed the way my family dynamic works now. What else? Okay. So I will say that the Hanged Man, we talk about this pause and reflect, but what good is the pause and reflect if we're not doing the deeper reflection? I will tell you that I was just having a conversation with my husband, and it went something along the lines of, I am in a new zone in my life, and I have to remember that, because I am so used to the old pattern of the world out to get me, taking life so personally, almost creating another victim realm, a victim matrix for myself. And although I can say I'm proud of myself for starting to recognize these behaviors, it's still such new territory to say life doesn't have to be taken this seriously. I don't have to be so personally affected by another person's journey. And I have to, and it doesn't matter how close to the situation I'm in. It doesn't matter how important the thing is to me. At the end of the day, I have the faith that all will work out according to the plan, that the plan that's bigger than me. And I also realize that if I treated this a little less seriously, I could have more fun in the process. So when you're talking Hanged Man, I need you to really start to look at perspectives. I need you to come in like a photographer with their camera. It's all about the angle. It's all about the way you take that photo. It's not a straight across thing. I can't get the same look that Mel can, because we come from different perspectives, right? But if we work together, I might find that new perspective and fall in love with it. So allow yourself some depth of understanding. Use the last 11 major arcana cards that we've been working through to get to your place. Go back to that high priestess, go back to the magician, start really focusing on the things that you can do and the way to work your way out of that labyrinth, that this prison that our mind can create, that guardian that stands in front of the wall that says you can't, or you are the victim, or you are this, so that you can, we've been talking a lot in my fellowship group about the drama triangle, right? Because we've been working in shadow work as well. And so the drama triangle comes up a lot. With the hanged man, it's a great question to ask yourself. Where am I in that drama triangle? Am I being the persecutor? Am I being the victim? Or am I being the rescuer? Or am I being a little bit of all three? How about I just step out of it? How about I am not responsible for any of this and I take a new look from a different arena? Allow yourself to really start getting into the whys, and don't be hard on yourself. Again, Mel and I have been walking this path diligently. This has been our main focus. Okay. This isn't everybody's main focus. So be gentle and compassionate with yourself, like you would a loved one whenever a mistake occurs. We are not put on this realm, this earth, to be perfect. We're here to grow and learn, and to learn what satisfaction really looks like. And that all comes down to balancing. So just be kind to yourself in this.
So some of the really simple methods that people can use when they put those either moments in the day, or they've got a whole day to themselves because the family are somewhere else, or they're visiting someone, or on holiday, is even if you do something like doodle. And so I don't know if that's the same word.
Yeah, no,
in America.
doodling. Yeah.
So you doodle, you get some colored pens, and if and I'm not an artist by any stretch of the word, but I like doodling because by the process of actually having something in your hand and doodling and using colors, or coloring things in, you can buy pads now that have got shapes and mandalas already created and you color them in. Is by focusing on that, what you do is you're coming out of your analytical mind, and it allows, once you come out of whatever the state is, whatever the thought process is, or the cycle that's going through your mind, once you come out of that and you're focused on the doodling, or you're just happily in that moment, it allows new insight to come in. But the thing is, without the practice, it's a bit like you don't really have the Velcro for that information to stick and for that to become relevant. And as you say, if there's lots of dramas being played out, whether you are instigating them or part of them, is once you start to remove yourself from that and pause, other people in that system that you're part of, whether that's at work, at school, your friendship group or your family group, will draw you back in. So it's noticing when you're in pause, but you start to step back and look at the world more objectively, and then look at the feelings that are aroused in that process. You can journal them, you can capture them, you can write them down, you can do some drawing.
Yeah.
And so even if you're not going to pause for more than an hour or 2 hours, doing something every day, using the hangman and the method within that can really start to help you to detach. And we've talked about detach a lot, haven't we, from whatever is playing out. And it can feel like it's getting worse, or sometimes it feels like you're overwhelmed and you can't comprehend. Then that's an even bigger sign and indicator, isn't it?
Yes, it is. To step back. Yeah. Because if it feels like it's all rushing forward as soon as you pause, then you really need to do some of that deeper reflection. And what you brought up actually led me to, one of my favorite, because there's so many paths that one can take, and it all ends in the same place, right? That's the beauty of what we're doing. And one of my favorites to get your mind in is the ritual work witchcraft does. Right. So you're not writing in a journal, you're not coloring, but what you're doing is you're collecting herbs, you're collecting pieces of items that need to come together. And what does that do? That takes you out of one mindset, and you're starting to create now So what are you doing? You're pulling into the next mindset. You're pulling deeper into a different level. You're starting to remain focused on the thing that you're trying to create. And so it brings up this subconscious creator mode for you. So now you're able to put all of these spices and, I mean, candle work, anything that witchcraft follows. One of my favorite things about witchcraft is the ritual work that gets done, because it takes you from one mindset to the other. And it's such a natural flow the way it happens that you don't really have to force yourself into it, because it's a step-by-step almost instruction to get you into it. So if you don't subscribe to witchcraft, that's completely fine. But you might subscribe to something like ritual work. And ritual work can be the same as the coloring book. It can be the same as the journaling, as the having that conversation with a friend. There's not a wrong way to do this. Whatever speaks to you is the right way for you. You are on your journey. So you take it in whatever way you want to see it. Mel and I like to sit on the more psychology side of things, but that's just our passion. But there's all of these different forms that are available for us. And there's not one that I like to combine a bunch of them, especially when I'm having a really rough time. I have not done one thing towards my business world that hasn't started out with ritual work. And I'm not really what I would consider a witch. I am more like, I practice a little bit of everything. I like an omniist of sorts, I like all of it. And so I did want to bring that one up as well.
Well, the other aspects of that is, so rituals and routines are really important in terms of mental health and well-being anyway. And a lot of organizations that work on the clinical side really recognize the value of that. But I like different crystals. I've got a range of jewelry that's got different crystals in it. And flowers and herbs and crystals all have their own frequencies.
Yes, they do.
So you can either get a box of different crystals and choose that and work with that, and either work with the color of it or even just tuning in, because the moment you put your attention on something, the moment you're connecting with that energy of
that's
that,
right.
aren't you?
Yeah.
And you can take it to the next layer, where if you were doing chakra work, for example, and every chakra has its own frequency, and you were having issues with feeling safe and secure in the world, and it's hard for you to pause because you're overwhelmed. Well, there are charts around, I'm sure, on Pinterest and Google and all over the place, where you can work out what crystal has the same frequency as the root chakra, what sound has the same frequency, what noise and what movement. And there's even yoga poses that work on the different chakras.
That's exactly right.
What you do. So everything is interconnected. And as Danielle said, it's just really making a decision to do some self-care, to focus on yourself and see if things are being played out. What is it that's being played out? And by pausing and reflecting and then drawing towards whatever that thing is. I use salt bath every day as well. I've been doing that for the last 3 years. And now that process is in place, it's so easy to get up, do that and soak, and then do my yoga, because it's become routine rather than it being something that I have to force myself to do. And that's what you'll find naturally starts to occur after a while. Is that you'll just pull those things towards you naturally, won't you?
Yeah, and you will. When you're talking crystals, crystal gridding, doing grids work as well. And you can it doesn't have to look a certain way. That's the beauty of it. You're just tapping into your creative spirit and allowing that to kind of push itself forward. And it really does. What it does is it loosens the mind. It allows the mind a moment, a temporary pause, if you will, so that you may reach the deeper regions of it, because you're not sitting here mulling over the same thought pattern that you've been perhaps for weeks, months, years. With the Hanged Man, with all of these Major Arcana cards, I like to ask questions. And so I've got a couple of questions, or 3 questions here for you. Is there a situation in my life that I feel stuck in? Do I feel like a decision may be needed to change my stuck feeling? Am I willing to be open to taking new perspectives? And like always, these are basic questions that lead to a deeper thought pattern so that you can ask yourself the harder questions. This is your journey and you're responsible for the depth at which you go. I can just prompt you along the way. Mel and I are here as prompts, as lighthouses, as just somebody holds the lantern, because we've kind of been down a lot of these places. And, but at the end of the day, over and over and over, Mel and I think, have learned that this is a personal journey, and I can only take you so far, because it's up to you on the depth that you're willing to reach. And the darker spaces that you can go to is going to be the lighter that you can get into, like you can receive. It's this beautiful paradox, as part of the Hermetic principles that I follow so deeply. It's that divine paradox. It's, you must go through the darkness to reach the light. You must be able to understand your fears in order to overcome them. And you can't run from fears and overcome them. You have to face them in whatever way. And what's the scariest, really? It's what's inside of our heads, right? In the physical, there's scary things, but more than likely, we're not going to come across those most of the time. It's what's in our head that gets the scariest, right?
Yeah. And the way to sort of bring more of the psychology into it is, if you're asking you that question, do I feel stuck? You can ask yourself, where have I felt stuck before? And how did I unstick myself? What was it that was going on? Did I feel it? Was it a feeling? Was it an emotion? Was it a memory? Because sometimes when we're working on things, especially when we're revisiting patterns and cycles, you can have an experience now, but have a flash. And for me, sometimes it's almost like taking a photo, where a photo will come into my mind, or a feeling will come, or a song will come that takes you back to the original time where you might have felt that before. So you can ask, if you were using hypnosis methodology, you could say, where is it that I felt that before? Is this resonating? You can ask your unconscious mind, bring up some information that will help me understand. And it may be that you apply something different to get yourself unstuck. But the other aspect of that is, especially really crucial if you do suffer from depression, low mood, anxiety, anything like that, is you can quite quickly forget where you've done well. So part of pausing is to also review what's gone well. Where have I made some changes that helped me when I pause? When I slow down and don't get overwhelmed and don't get involved in all the dramas, what good feelings do I feel? So how you also, because we talk about the shadow, but it's also about recognizing where we've made some shifts and changes, especially if you've revisited things a few times, isn't it?
Yeah. Because sometimes, like, I'm a full supporter of shadow work, but at some point you've got to do some light work, right? We can dredge all of the nasty, ugly things, the things that we deny about ourselves, the things that we might have pushed down all day long. But at some point you have to start saying, but what about the good, right? Now, we've got to make some fun places in this. We have to take this heavy, because it feels heavy when you're in shadow. Heavy feelings, this energy is thick. We've got, you're walking through these murky waters, but maybe you found a respite spot, right? Like, this is like that analogy of getting up on the bank for a minute, go stand in a clearing for a minute, allow the light to come through, be proud of how far you've come, give yourself that break, acknowledge who you are, and empower yourself again. Because this is not light work. This isn't something, because if it were, everybody would do it, right? But not everybody's willing to go there. So there's moments of pause. There's moments when you've got to take that moment and say, okay, but I've made it to here. So I'm really proud of the work I've been doing. Even if things look messy around me right now, I can't imagine what they would look like if I hadn't done the work to get to this place, or what my reaction would be to this, or how I would feel. I have a friend that spouse went into the hospital, and she just said, I am grateful that this didn't happen a year ago, because I would have lost my mind. Now I'm trying to hold steady. I am trying to remain balanced, because this isn't about me. This is about my person. And to hear that type of expression from somebody that was spinning out when I first met them is just, it's so big to acknowledge yourself as much as you are trying to clear. We are really in the process of acknowledging as well. So I agree. Sorry. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, no, I think that they're really brilliant points. And I think the key aspect of that, as you say, is if you experience overwhelm or stuckness, you can get so stuck in your perspective, and in NLP they say, you can't find the solution using the same process in which the problem was created. And if you're overwhelmed and confused, you sometimes need to come into yourself and withdraw and focus on yourself. But you also then need to maybe think of the other perspectives that other people hold. And I know that trips me up at times. So it's kind of like learning new skills, but sometimes you focus on one or two rather than trying to resolve it all, because it could even be that everything's going great and you're completing a pattern, a process, a job, a project, moving forward with things that are exciting. And the pause itself can allow you to really milk the experience of how well you've done and how far you've got, so
Right.
that you don't just keep going from one thing to the next, no matter how great it is. And again, it's allowing the system to really just celebrate that. So if you're in that space, sit back and celebrate how far you've come. I mean, everyone must have come so really way far in terms of what's been happening the last 2 years, because
Yeah.
we had to keep pausing because lockdown was in force, wasn't it? And people had to be in their houses and shut down in terms of all of the day-to-day activity. So let's utilize that experience that we've had of doing that and use that as touch point in our regular lives,
Yeah.
rather than externally it being impose
Right.
it on ourselves. Because the beautiful depth and quality of experiences that you can have when
Yeah.
you do that on a regular basis,
Yeah.
we can't even describe that, can we?
No,
We obviously know
the
they're there.
only way I've been able to describe this is if you've experienced a form of grief, right? And emotion, the emotional aspect aside, what happens is you literally get rid of everything that's not the most important, right? All of those distractions really seem to start to fall away because they're not important to you anymore. Because while you're facing this major life event, and you're experiencing this grief inside of this life event, and you just naturally let the things that don't matter fall away, and you take a little more care of yourself in that way. And so that's kind of the best way that I can describe in a personal experience what it's when it's time to really take care of yourself and slow down and pause, is to compare it to a grief experience when you really had to slow down and pause and reflect and heal and before you started to move forward again. All right. So the last thing that I have for us is the tarot spread. And I've kind of just given up on these major arcanas, on keeping them short, the tarot spread. So this is a 5-card spread. And so the first one is going to be your challenge. So what is your viewpoint and what is the conflict about, right? So your challenge. The second one is going to be your feelings. The third one is going to be the source of your feelings. The fourth card is going to be what needs sacrificed. So what do I need to let go of? And that can look like all kinds of things. And then the fifth one is, what is the awakening? If I laid down my walls, what would the message be? If I took down everything that I've set up to protect myself, what would that grand aha moment be? Which is just an awakening, right? We have many awakenings throughout our life. So what's the aha moment for you? So allow those cards. And I will tell you that you can use a tarot or an oracle. I've been sitting in the hanged man energy when I was writing this, and I actually did this tarot spread, and I did it with oracle cards because I was called to do it with oracle cards. And it really was just the right guidance I needed to get out of that energy, because the energy was quickly turning from the hanged man, which was necessary, to the hanged man in reverse, which meant that I was going to be stagnated. I was going to be sitting in my analysis paralysis, where I just sat in my thought and just worked up a whole drama that wasn't necessary for myself, So yeah, so you can use tarot or oracle. We do speak about the major arcana through the psychology of it. So we're not stuck on a tarot or an oracle spread for you.
Yeah, it's just that process, isn't it, of using a tool, whatever the tool is, but we're talking about cards in some way, to connect with and see whether or not the colors, the picture, the imagery, the story in that, how that resonates with you. And if that makes sense. And if people aren't used to using it, they all come with a book, don't they? And what I sometimes do is I don't always get it in the moment because I'm reading and I kind of sometimes superficially read it. And then I write it down and I give it some space and then I go back to it. And I find that a really helpful process. And it might be just before I go to bed, or it might be that I pull them. And then when you're asleep, there's just some magical things that happen when you're asleep in your psyche, that whatever you're focusing on, thinking about before you go to sleep, and so that's a useful process to do at that time, can really mean that all the healing work and all the energetics of that is starting to clear. And if you physically feel stuck, as I've said on several other podcasts that we've done, because I regularly do, is then you need to apply, say, like the Chinese 5 elements, and do some flow yoga,
Right.
whether it's like vinyasa yoga or whether it is yin yoga, but you do something that's got flow in that.
That does
Because
flow.
getting the
Qigong or
yeah,
Tai Chi really
Qigong,
works
yeah,
too. Yeah. It depends on what your
yeah,
physical level is in this. Yeah.
exactly.
Loosen up all of those energy places in your body. We are made up of energies. We are
Yeah,
atoms, and atoms are what? So, you know, like we are just a larger form of energy. And so to loosen up the stuck energy requires some form of movement. So
yeah,
whatever your physical capabilities are and whatever level you're at, there is something out there that a search engine or a quick YouTube search will show you. So there's plenty of things out here for us to learn and continue to grow. And, you know, when you get the hanged man in front of you, just take that moment of pause and reflection and use it to your benefit. You know, you're going to have a tower moment coming up in this major arcana. So now it's time to really pay attention to how important it is that pause and reflect it, you know, will be. So that tower moment comes as more of a conscious awareness and not a, oh my God, devastation moment.
yeah, brilliant.
All right, guys. So check us out at Mel and Danielle on Facebook. Like and share, and definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are growing. And if you have any questions, just hit us up.
Brilliant. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.